When I bought the house at 1429 Rosewood Lane, I thought I'd finally found peace. Just me, a wraparound porch, and a backyard big enough for bonfires and barbecues. The kind of place where you could sip coffee on a Sunday morning and hear birds instead of honking. That illusion shattered the day Karen arrived with pruning shears and a smug grin. Let me back up. My name's Lucas Gentry. 35. Single. Own my own home inspection business and, until recently, I minded my own business, too. I moved into Rosewood Estates because of the quiet, the trees, and the privacy. Especially the privacy. My backyard stretched all the way to the alley, enclosed by a sturdy cedar fence that my grandfather and I rebuilt ourselves years ago. It wasn't just a boundary, it was sacred. Then came Karen. She moved in 2 houses down the block about 8 months ago, bringing with her an SUV the size of a yacht, a landscaping crew that mowed every Tuesday at precisely 7 a.m., and an aura of suburban tyranny that could sour milk. You know the type: clipboard, walkie-talkie, and the unearned confidence of someone who once organized a bake sale and now thinks they can run the Pentagon. Karen didn't become HOA president. She absorbed the position like a villain in a comic book absorbs powers. No vote, no welcome, just a passive-aggressive email that said, effective immediately, I'll be leading Rosewood Estates into a brighter, rule-abiding future. That should have been the first red flag. But I didn't realize what she was capable of until she marched into my yard like she owned it. It was a Tuesday. I'd just gotten back from a long inspection job, crawl spaces, mold checks, the works, and was dropping my gear in the garage when I heard the unmistakable sound of wood snapping. I walked around the side of my house and froze. There, in my backyard, was Karen, garden shears in hand, slicing through the boards of my fence like she was preparing a stage for some deranged school play. "Hey!" I shouted, marching toward her. "What do you think you're doing?" She turned slowly, as if I'd interrupted her mid-masterpiece. "Lucas," she said, calm as cream. "This part of the fence violates community accessibility standards. I'm creating an easement." I blinked. "An easement? This is my fence. On my property." She clicked her tongue like a disapproving ant. "Yes, but the alley behind your yard provides the shortest route from my home to the community mailbox and the Greenbelt Trail. This fence creates an obstruction. According to Clause 7.1c of the Rosewood Charter, any obstruction to shared pathways may be removed if deemed necessary." I stared. "There's no Clause 7.1c. Karen smirked. "Well, it's part of the addendum I'll be proposing at next month's HOA meeting. In the meantime, I've taken initiative." "By trespassing?" "By ensuring community flow," she said, resuming her work like we were done talking. That's when I did what I should have done the minute she picked up those shears. I called the police. Officer Denby showed up 15 minutes later, clearly annoyed to be dealing with a property line dispute at dinner time. I showed him my deed, pointed out the survey markers, and walked him to the alley where Karen's newly created shortcut had been hacked through like something out of a horror film. Karen tried to play the victim, of course. Claimed she was being harassed. That I'd trapped her by building an illegal barrier. That she needed that shortcut for mobility reasons, even though I'd seen her jogging in full Lululemon the morning before. Denby did his best to stay neutral, but when he finally said, "Ma'am, you can't just cut down someone else's fence," Karen's face twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon rind. "You'll regret this," she whispered to me as she stomped back to her house. And boy, did she mean it. Over the next few weeks, Karen went full scorched earth. She filed 3 bogus HOA violation notices against me: peeling paint, there was none; unauthorized architectural modifications. She claimed my rain barrel was an eyesore, and improper waste management. Apparently, my compost bin attracted pests, even though hers was closer to the alley. She posted on Nextdoor claiming someone threatened her safety in a dispute over property lines, and that the board was considering legal options. Every time I walked past her house, I felt the stare, cold, calculating, like she was taking notes on my every step. But I didn't bite. Because while Karen was trying to beat me with noise, I was playing the long game. I started digging, literally and legally. I pulled up city zoning maps, surveyor data, land deeds. And that's when I found something interesting, something she hadn't. The land behind our homes, a 10-foot wide strip that backed the alley. It wasn't part of Karen's lot. And it wasn't officially HOA land either. It was tax-defaulted property, left over from a decades-old subdivision plan that had been abandoned. Which meant it was for sale at the next county land auction. And I had just enough time, and more than enough motivation, to make a move. When I tell people I bought Karen's backyard, they usually think I'm exaggerating. Like I purchased some metaphorical victory or made a dramatic gesture to prove a point. No. I mean, I literally bought her backyard. Let's rewind. The county land auction was scheduled for the second Tuesday of the month. Tucked in the basement of a municipal building that still smelled like 1970s carpet glue, the auction felt more like a DMV reunion than a battleground. Rows of plastic chairs. Clipboards. People clutching manila folders like they held the nuclear codes. And there I was, Lucas Gentry, clipboard in hand, sipping cold coffee and waiting for lot number 1142 to be called. A 10-foot strip of land so forgettable on paper that half the room hadn't even noticed it. But I had. See, Karen had built her entire backyard experience, the cobblestone patio, the pergola with twinkle lights, even part of her precious vegetable garden, on that strip. Probably assuming, like most people, that it was part of her lot. But it wasn't. Not legally. And now it was up for grabs. When the auctioneer read the parcel number, I could feel my pulse in my throat. Opening bid? $1,000. I raised my paddle without hesitation. A man in the back blinked at the number but didn't move. The auctioneer scanned the room. No other bids? Going once. Karen burst through the back door like a suburban hurricane. Her sunglasses were still on, her purse swinging wildly like it had been used as a weapon. She spotted me and stormed forward. "I'd like to bid," she said, breathless. The room went quiet. The auctioneer glanced at the rules. "Ma'am, the bid is currently at $1,000. Do you have your deposit receipt?" Karen froze. "My what?" "You need a certified deposit to bid. It's in the registration packet." Karen's voice cracked. "But this is my property." "No, it isn't," I said, calmly. "It's publicly owned surplus land behind several private lots. Including yours." I turned slightly, made sure she could see my smile. "Well, formerly yours." The auctioneer didn't wait. "Going twice, sold to bidder number 76. I signed the paperwork that day. Wired the money. Paid the processing fees. It was mine. All of it." "Karen?" She left in a rage so hot I'm surprised the glass doors didn't melt on her way out. But the real fun didn't start until the county survey team came out to install the boundary markers. I invited a few neighbors over just to watch. Picture this, a pair of guys in neon vests, walking the property line with measuring wheels and metal stakes. Every few feet, one would hammer a new marker into the ground. Each thunk was a tiny funeral bell for Karen's backyard dreams. By the end of the afternoon, the line of survey flags neatly bisected her patio. Her raised beds? Mine now. The pathway she used to shortcut through my yard? Closed for business. And her garage? Well, let's just say the edge of that new property line ran right through its concrete foundation. That night, I poured myself a bourbon, turned on the porch light, and waited. At 8:13 p.m., she showed up. Stormed into my driveway like a politician on primary night. "You don't get to take part of my land," she shouted. "It wasn't yours," I replied evenly. "It was county-owned. You never bought it. Never paid taxes on it. Never claimed it. I used it for unauthorized gardening and storage," I said, holding up the plat map. "And I've documented every bit of encroachment. Would you like a copy?" She lunged toward me, but I stepped aside and opened the mailbox on my porch. Inside was an envelope, already addressed to her. Consider this your formal notice of boundary realignment and property transfer. She snatched it, tore it open, and stopped cold. I had titled the document, Notification of Development, Karen's Shortcut Memorial Park. You're not serious, she whispered. Dead serious, I said, walking back inside. Groundbreaking begins next week. I wasn't bluffing. The next morning, I filed for a permit to install a decorative garden fence, a swing bench, and a small ornamental sign with landscaping that gently suggested, "Don't trespass here, Karen." She tried to fight back, of course. Filed a cease and desist. Claimed I was harassing her. But she couldn't afford a lawyer, not a real one. And mine? Mine was my cousin Rachel, a zoning attorney with a mean streak and an axe to grind. Karen got a stern letter. Then a court date. Then an invoice for removal of her pergola after it was found to be partially on my new land. Each move she made was like watching someone play chess against a grandmaster using a checkerboard. She wasn't just losing. She didn't even know the rules. And I wasn't done. It started with a permit. A simple, boring piece of paper that I filed online over my lunch break. I didn't think much of it at the time, just standard documentation for installing a decorative garden wall. But what I got back was far more interesting. See, in order to finalize the application, the city required updated property measurements. I sent them my newly recorded land deed and plat survey. A week later, I received a call from a city inspector named Mel, real straight shooter, the kind of guy who smelled like coffee and drywall dust. Mel came out, took one look at the garage in Karen's backyard, and scratched his head. "This structure crosses into your lot by 4 feet, he said, squinting at the clipboard. I nodded. I thought so. You planning to tear it down? That gave me pause. I hadn't considered it. Yet. No, I said slowly, but I'd like to make sure it's not registered under her property. It's technically encroachment, right? Mel let out a low whistle. Oh yeah. She can't claim that structure unless she buys the land underneath it, and since you own it now, that's not gonna happen. I smiled. Good. Karen's garage was her pride and joy. She'd bragged about it during one of the few neighborhood barbecues I ever attended, insulated, epoxy floors, even a wall-mounted wine fridge. But now, legally speaking, about 40% of it wasn't hers. So I filed a second permit. This one for residential parcel modification and structural review. A fancy way of saying, I was challenging the legality of her garage. And the moment that notice hit her mailbox, I heard the scream all the way from my kitchen. That weekend, Karen marched up my driveway with a rolled-up survey map in one hand and a folder in the other. She was dressed for battle, blazer, low heels, hair in a bun so tight it could probably stop a bullet. You need to undo this, she said through gritted teeth. I leaned against my porch rail. Undo what? The garage petition. The complaint. The whatever this is. You're ruining my property value. Karen, I said, feigning concern, I didn't build your garage on my land. You did. You know damn well it's been there for years. And it was never yours to build on. You never checked the line. That's on you. Her voice dropped into a low hiss. This is harassment. No, I said. This is consequence. The next few weeks were like watching a high-rise slowly tip over. First, a city inspector issued a stop work order on any modifications to her garage, pending a legal review. Then came a letter from my lawyer, requesting that she either demolish the encroaching section or pay rent for the square footage she was occupying. Karen refused. So I escalated. I put up a wooden partition, 6 feet high, right down the new boundary line, bisecting her garage like a knife through birthday cake. One half of the garage remained accessible through her driveway. The other half? Mine. And locked. She tried to break through it once. I caught it on camera and submitted the footage to the local authorities. They issued a warning for trespassing. Her next move was even dumber. She called a contractor to reclaim her space. I watched from my home office window as two guys with tool belts stood staring at the partition. One of them knocked on my door. "You want us to remove this wall?" I showed him the land deed. He whistled. "Never mind." They packed up and left. Karen went from smug to stunned. She stopped waving at neighbors. Stopped walking her dog. Her flowers wilted. Her emails to the HOA board became frantic, filled with accusations that I was weaponizing real estate. But I wasn't done. Because I had one more ace to play. You see, while Karen was busy trying to bully her way across my backyard, she'd made one tiny, crucial mistake. She'd failed to pay her HOA dues for the vacant parcel that her garage partially occupied. Why? Because she assumed it was her yard. Not common land. Not shared space. She didn't even know it had a separate tax ID. But now? That overdue bill had triggered a lien. And liens? They go to auction. Again. There's something poetic about taking a seat in the front row of a disaster you didn't cause, but definitely helped accelerate. The backyard parcel Karen's garage straddled, a 12 by 30-foot sliver of untended earth, was up for auction at 9 a.m. sharp. The county listed it as residential lot, unimproved, encumbered by structure, which is a fancy way of saying, someone built something dumb here, and now we're selling it. I arrived early. Not out of urgency, but for dramatic effect. Karen was already there, pacing the concrete lobby like a lioness who'd just realized her cage had a lock on the outside. Her face was pale. She held a printed copy of her HOA fee records, fluttering in her grip like surrender flags that hadn't worked. "Don't do this," she whispered when she spotted me. "Do what?" I asked innocently, though we both knew the answer. "This is petty." I tilted my head. "So is cutting down my fence." She opened her mouth, but the clerk called us in before she could start a monologue. Inside the county annex chamber, really just a rebranded conference room with a podium and some folding chairs, a county official read the opening terms. Lot 1882A, current back dues, $847. Outstanding lien, verified. Auction begins now. The room was mostly quiet, just a few property flippers half asleep and a retired couple whispering about road access. Nobody else seemed to care about a parcel that didn't even have a mailbox. Starting bid, $1. I raised my paddle. Karen's breath caught audibly. $500, she said quickly. The clerk raised his eyebrows. $600, I replied. Karen's voice trembled. 1,000. I didn't blink. 1,500. Her jaw tightened. 2,000. The retired couple looked over at her like she'd just tried to buy air. Everyone knew the land was useless, unless you were already squatting on it. Which she was. I calmly raised my paddle again. 3,000. Karen's hands were shaking. Her eyes darted to her phone like she was hoping someone would wire her divine intervention. Going once, the clerk announced. Karen's lips parted. Going twice. She opened her mouth to bid. Sold. To bidder number 76. It was over. Again. Only this time, what I bought wasn't just a property line or a sliver of grass. It was leverage. That afternoon, I filed a formal eviction notice for the encroaching portion of her garage, including the rear storage area, the tool bench, and the wine fridge she once boasted about. She was livid. "You're stealing from me," she shrieked as she stomped up my porch. I didn't open the door. Just slipped the notice into her mailbox and walked back inside. The next day, she tried to host an emergency HOA meeting to fight it. Only 2 people showed up. One of them left halfway through. The other was there for the cookies. Meanwhile, I made improvements to my new property. Leveled the ground. Planted hydrangeas. Installed a tasteful wrought iron gate with a sign that read, Karen's Shortcut Memorial Park. Visitors welcome. Trespassers will be photographed and publicly mocked. I even got a neighbor to donate a little bench engraved with the quote, "Access denied, EST 2024. It became a bit of a tourist spot. People would walk their dogs past it just to see Karen fume behind her curtains. Kids took selfies. One guy filmed a TikTok dance on the patio's edge that got 80,000 views in a weekend. But Karen wasn't done fighting. No. She filed a lawsuit. Sued me for emotional distress, unlawful land seizure, and malicious landscaping. Her lawyer, an overworked guy who looked like he'd rather be selling insurance, didn't even last the first hearing. My lawyer shredded their case in less than 10 minutes. The judge said, and I quote, "Ms. Whitaker, you cannot claim ownership over land you neither purchased, taxed, nor respected." Dismissed. With prejudice. The aftermath? Karen resigned from the HOA. The neighborhood held a celebratory cookout. I was asked to bring the grill. Someone even made a cake with little edible survey flags on it. As for her garage, she tore it down. The part that crossed my boundary line? Gone. The rest? Boarded up and listed for storage only on a city compliance notice. And her shortcut? Replaced by my hydrangeas, 3 solar lights, and a plaque that glints just right at sunset. There's something permanent about putting your enemy's name on a plaque. Not just symbolic, but official. Public. Etched in metal and memory. 2 months after the lawsuit fizzled out, Karen put her house up for sale. The listing appeared on Zillow under a bland description: charming colonial with updated landscaping, detached garage, and excellent community leadership potential. I nearly spit out my coffee. The garage was detached, all right, forcibly detached from nearly half its foundation. And leadership potential was doing some heavy lifting considering most of the neighborhood still referred to Karen's term as the reign of error. Her asking price was too high. No surprise. It sat on the market for weeks. Then months. Meanwhile, my little garden corner bloomed. Neighbors kept dropping off gifts for the park. First it was a wind chime. Then a painted rock that read, "You shall not pass." A woman from 2 streets over knitted a seat cushion for the bench with Karen's name stitched in passive-aggressive cursive. I didn't encourage it. I just didn't stop it either. Then came the City Beautification Committee. Someone, I'm guessing Mrs. Haddock from the Garden Club, nominated Karen's Shortcut Memorial Park for Best Microgreen Space. I got an email inviting me to a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It was surreal. There I stood, in a button-down I hadn't worn since my last job interview, while a councilwoman cut a red ribbon next to a bench installed purely out of spite. Flashbulbs popped. Someone handed me a certificate. Kids played tag around the hydrangeas like it was their new favorite trailhead. Karen saw the photos, of course. The post made the community newsletter, front page. A smiling group of residents, the plaque clearly visible behind us, surrounded by flowers and civic pride. She lowered the price of her house the next day. She moved out quietly a few weeks later. No goodbyes. No farewell speech. Just a for sale sign that eventually read under contract, and a moving truck that rattled down the street at 6 a.m. sharp. The rumor was she took a job with another HOA in a different county. God help them. As for me, I kept the park. Not because I'm petty, though, okay, maybe a little, but because it became something more. A reminder that sometimes, the best revenge isn't a lawsuit, or a confrontation, or even public humiliation. Sometimes, it's a bench. With your enemy's name. Right where they cut down your fence. And every time I walk past that swing gate, I remember the sound her shears made the first time she declared war. The snip of cedar. The smug smile. The audacity. And I smile back. Because I didn't fight her with shouting. I fought her with patience. With paperwork. With boundaries. Literal ones. And I won. So if you ever find yourself face to face with a Karen who thinks the rules bend to her clipboard, remember this. Fences can be rebuilt. Land can be bought. And shortcuts? They always lead exactly where they deserve. Lucas Gentry, founder of Karen's Shortcut Memorial Park. Free admission. No trespassing.